This is how we start off our shows, okay? We start off on the left side, and we go, hodl, 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 save, 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 build a, sound money. All right, this is Ugly Old Goat here, and I'm going to do a read-through of my most recent article called The Putin Gold Peg and What It Means to the economy, to the U.S. dollar, to Bitcoin, and the world economy. Now, this is a pretty lengthy article, and I put a lot of time into it, and I think it's getting some attention. But before I begin, I do want to refer you guys to the Financial Summit, which is going to be in the Dominican Republic on the first week of August 1st through August 6th. The Goat Lady and I will both be there. I can highly recommend it. This is the third Financial Summit. I've been to all three. The first one was in Bali, and that was just fantastic. And then we had the one last year was in Dubai, which was also great, but I like Bali better. And this one is at a place I've never been and always wanted to go because I've heard nothing but good things, and that's the Dominican Republic. And Tone has rented, I think, an entire castle. It's a very laid-back event. It's for traders and investors, hedge funds, basic family trading groups and so forth. It's for high net worth individuals. But if you want to hang out together, this is a great time to do it. Everything's included, guys. So the food, the drinks, and it's very relaxed. So while it looks like a high price tag, it's really not, if you can afford to go. So anyway, the Goat Lady and I will be there. Just want to give you a quick plug. We don't go to very many things, but this is one event we don't want to miss. All right, so I'm going to begin with this article that I wrote, and I just finished it, I think, over the weekend or last Friday, not very long ago. But it talks about the Putin Gold Peg and what it means for the U.S. dollar and the world economy. And I'll just read it, and I'll comment along the way. Last month, I outlined what the Russian gold ruble peg means to Bitcoin. Now, you can hit all these links. If you hit here, you'll see there's that article. I'm going to go back like that. All right. So, anyway, there's a lot of links here. We're not going to go through the links. I might hit a couple of them, but this article will take some time to get through if you go back and study it. A lot of links and a lot of references. And the original article that I wrote, I deliberately limited in scope because while I am somewhat credentialed in Bitcoin and gold because of my background and experience, I do consider myself just a second-rate self-taught economist. And I thought it best to leave the implications to the U.S. dollar and the world economy for those better trained. But, after a month from my last article, there's just been a dearth of information on the subject. And, June 30th, it was coming up here. And apparently the significance of this Russian gold peg has been completely missed by traditional gold bugs, Bitcoin maximalists, along with legacy economists in the West. And then upon further thought, I think this maybe should have been more obvious to me. I should have expected it as an aging boomer who had the privilege of growing up with circulating silver certificates, silver dollars, 50-cent Franklins, silver quarters, silver dimes, nickels that were nickels, and copper pennies that were made of copper. And that's really quite the opposite of the metaverse. And that's why I think there is kind of a disconnect between the baby boomers and the new digital age, because we did have real hard money, and I don't think that's something that should be ignored, because I think we might be going a little bit to the other extreme when we're going to the high technology. But at any rate, when I was a kid, the 50-cent Franklin dollar, I remember, boy, it was great if I got one of these. Silver dollar, I maybe would get as a gift, but one of these I could work and maybe earn. And I remember I bought this rocket ship that we had a big field in our backyard, and I could fly that rocket ship all over the backyard. And it was 49 cents. And back then, the sales tax was 2%, so it was an extra penny for the sales tax. So I got that rocket ship for just 50 cents. And that was 2% sales tax was until 1963. I was born in 1949, so I probably bought that rocket ship when I don't know what age it was, probably 9 or 10 or 11 years old, that age group. And likewise, when I was a kid, I remember buying the Three Musketeers candy bar for a nickel, and they called it the Three Musketeers because you could divide it three ways. It was bigger than all the other candy bars. We cut that into three pieces, and I'd share it with two friends. But those days are over with. So I don't know, these candy bars I think are about $2 now. So the 1971 Nixon closing of the gold window seems to be the starting point of most contemporary sound money commentaries. Yet the current monetary situation hardly began in 1971. In monetary affairs, perhaps more than anywhere else, Shakespeare's "The sins of the father are to be laid upon the children" holds true. Now, this is not as it should be. Children should not be held for their father's sins. However, without a repentance or a change of heart, that is how it is. I mean, I think it's back there in the Psalms or something I have that Scripture actually reveals that that's where it is. And there's an article about it. Yet the current monetary situation hardly began in 1971. In monetary affairs, perhaps more than anywhere else, Shakespeare's "The sins of the father are to be laid upon the children" holds true. Now, this is not as it should be. Yet, without a repentance or change of heart, this is how it is. And I actually have a reference to an article which kind of refers to Scripture and you know, that the Lord does hold generations responsible if they don't change the sins of if they pick up and continue the sins of their father. Children are held responsible for their father's sins when they adopt them as their own for as many as 4 generations. And I think we've done that now for 4 generations. I'm not blaming any generation. I just think that's the way it is, and I think that's what we're seeing today. And it's culminating in this generation. Now, that said, with my generation, the baby boom generation, came the straw man that identifies, divides, splits, and distinguishes generations from the natural homogeneous family unit. We were the ones that were the baby boomers. There weren't divisions in generations that much before we came up with that term. Subsequently, every entitlement that can be imagined has been imposed through the theft of inflation, taxation of labor, distribution bureaucracies, regulations, and prohibitions with the promise of cradle-to-grave security. And these delusions that we have today, they did not come about in a vacuum. During my parents' era, the concept of nursing homes and Medicare for the elderly emerged. Before that, there really weren't many nursing homes. It was an era, it was the era of my grandparents. And again, my father was born in 1913, so you can kind of give an idea where that. I'm 73 years old tomorrow, actually today, because today's my birthday. I didn't know that till I got out of prison. I always thought my birthday was June 29th, but I found out when I had to get a new Social Security card that legally I'm born on June 28th. So today I'm 73 years old. So it was an era that my grandparents, they came up with the idea of Social Security, and this was imposed on the nation. Now, they were born about 1880s, and when they reached their, my grandfather actually went to fight on World War I. He was part of the Great War, and they had that song over there, over here, over there, whatever it was. But that was a big event, for that generation. And actually, this whole idea of Social Security was enabled by my great-grandparents who immigrated to the United States after the Civil War. And it was during their generation that banking was centralized and labor was taxed. We created the Federal Reserve. And before that time, guys, you would work. There was no income tax, and I think income tax is a horrible thing. No man's labor should be taxed. I think that is something that this generation, if you work real hard, you might be able to get that repealed, because I think the thinking should always be we need to tax the people that don't work and not tax people that are actually creating wealth. Now, prior to this, wealth in America was largely decentralized through family farms and industry. Men were free to work without being taxed. Those who did not work did not eat. And if they wanted to eat and they were able, they worked. And accommodations were offered to the society's incorrigibles in the local almshouse or poorhouse through charity, with the appropriate abysmal conditions and stigma associated with it. And it had strings attached. Work to eat when able. And this was offered by the local community, and it was distinguished from the few without family, considered to be what they actually call it the worthy poor. And these people were like widows without skills to work, and they had no other family. And these services were not imposed from the top down and people taxed, but was actually offered from the bottom up, and were for the most part freely given through individual charity. And this link has a history of nursing homes, which I thought was interesting. Now, we've degenerated so far from the family and community unit that it becomes nearly impossible to even vaguely describe what once was without adopting the false narratives to create the division. And by that, I mean that adultery was once equated with spousal and child abuse. Marriage was considered, they considered it ordained by God, and it was between a man and a woman. Divorce was deprecated, and sexual perversion was explicitly acknowledged as a social anathema or curse. But these are now alien concepts, and it's considered hateful, bigoted views for those taxing and forcing you to celebrate their perversions through a, quote, free, subsidized, protected press. And, I'm here, I think this is the LGBTQT, whatever it is, month, and I'm hearing all these, we've got to celebrate it, and they're actually doing public radio spots where the government's, promoting this as being almost like a national holiday to celebrate. We're celebrating with pride what we used to be ashamed of. Now, the logical result is that nonsense has come, and a technical billionaire betting with governments preaches universal basic income and heaven on earth. And the reference here is to Elon Musk. And if you check his background, that's basically what he's done. He climbs in bed with government on all of his business ideas, and he truly believes that people will be without work because we're going to be able to create this utopia on earth, and so we need to also correspond with that, have a universal basic income. And at the same time, we have a confessing evangelical Christian who's devoted a lot of time and energy to the question, what is a woman? And he never really mentioned the gospel at all. These are just silly questions that, why even spend the time a day to address them, and yet it's so prevalent in society, they feel the need to. But it really just demonstrates where we are today compared to where we were 4 generations ago. Heaven and earth, or heaven and hell, which is revealed by Almighty God in Scripture, has been replaced with an alternative universe reachable by puny men through evolutionary stories of human progress. And this human progress, in order to explain evolution, you have to have the premise of billions of years reaching depths far exceeding the Dead Sea of Sodom and Gomorrah and Death Valley of California combined. So we should hardly be shocked that a relatively simple task of establishing a standard for sound money, which emerged organically during the Gilded Age, has become nearly impossible for this blinded generation, a generation that is fully deserving of its own times and what is to come, because we have not forsaken these sins that our fathers have brought. I'm as guilty as anyone else on this. I've made plenty of mistakes, and boy, sound money is not easy. On March 28th, 2022, Russia agreed to they pegged the ruble to gold at the rate of 5,000 rubles per gram, and this is was done through June 30th, 2022, and this is the equivalent of about $1,600 per troy ounce, which that's the way we price it here in the U.S. Now the deadline is approaching here in the next couple of days. I fully expect it'll be renewed. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually lower it. And to maintain this arbitration, because Russia's the only one that really can afford to do this. Nobody else can offer to sell gold below the market. In Russia, a gram is a weight and the ruble is the measure. And so what they're doing is they are actually the only nation that is providing now a just weight and measure, that's a moral thing. You have to have a just weight and measure. 1 ruble is 0.0002 grams of gold. And very few people really understand the implications. What's been done here, I don't think will be undone. Sound money works. And that is the limit of science. Whatever works, that's scientific. Now, this limit is a limit that pseudoscientists deny, but worthy scientists do acknowledge the limitations of science. Science is useful, but it is never true. Science is always changing. Excuse me. Science can build a better guillotine, but it does not declare who to use it on. The Russian peg has huge consequences in nearly every market, yet economists are like ostriches in the sand, and they just don't see it. So I've created a few charts here. The blue arrow, this is the Russian ruble. This has been the top performing asset ever since the gold peg was announced. The blue arrow is on March 28th, 2022, when the ruble was pegged to 5,000 rubles per gram, or about $1,600 an ounce, which is about 17.5% below the market. Now, the insiders knew up in here that they were going to announce it, so I think they probably realized what the implication was going to be. And so they were wisely buying the ruble. But even when it was announced, it was announced here, and you can see what's happened since then. It's been an asset. It's performed better than the S&P. It's performed better than gold. It's been performing better than Bitcoin and better than all other comparable assets. So this, I think, is clearly the new gold paradigm. And inflationists, they just don't get it, or they refuse to see it because they're blind. Now, here's the blue arrow, the same thing. This is Bitcoin, and you can see we have lost half of the value. Back there when it was announced, we were over $40,000 per Bitcoin, and now we're at $20,000. And so it went from 48,000 to 20,000, losing over 60% of its value. Now, that should not be surprising because gold is the only viable competition to Bitcoin. Saifedean Ammous recognizes this. I recognized it. It's the only thing that can compete with Bitcoin. Now, there's a lot of problems with it, but it doesn't surprise me. You have to recognize, if we had sound money, we would not need Bitcoin. Bitcoin was created because a lot of smart guys that knew cryptology realized we need a standard that can't be tampered with, and that's what they came up with Bitcoin. Now here's the S&P. Again, the blue arrow is when the new gold standard was announced, and you can see what's happened since then. Here is the gold peg. Now, it actually rallied. Initially, people thought, oh, this is bullish for gold, but then they started thinking about it. We've seen it go down here, too. So, and the last one here is the bond market, and you can see the yields have gone up substantially. So it was all came into the timing at the right time. When the ruble was collapsing, when the United States and NATO put in these sanctions, Russia and Putin did the right thing, and it's showing up in the market. If you can't see it, I really can't help you. But it's telling you who's winning the economic war. And the 1971 Nixon event was not the first time that America closed its gold window. Beginning in March 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt declared a bank holiday, and he issued an edict confiscating privately held gold, and then he began a three-phase program devaluing the dollar and restructuring the money system. And the history is fascinating. There's a link there. I do recommend you read that. History and the financial turmoil it created was unprecedented. And it led the nation and the world in the depths of the Great Depression. And it was really the defining moment of my father, who was born in 1913. And he also fought in World War II. He went to Australia and the Philippines. But the Great Depression really had more of an effect on him than World War II. And I remember, being in our rec room, eating dinner, and listening to my parents' hardships and our evening dining room table in the 1950s and early 60s, and hear about the Great Depression and how hard things were. But I just rolled my eyes because we didn't get it. And of course, we went on in the mid 1960s, and we were better, and we created all these new freedoms that we called the sexual revolution. So, guys, get the picture. I'm not, I see the same mistakes. Technology is not necessarily the answer to this thing, okay? Much more important than technology is morality. So, and for a time beginning in October 1933 and lasting through January 1934, FDR implemented what was called the gold repurchase plan. And he literally set the daily price of gold, and the purpose was to devalue the dollar. And it took a while to establish it and figure out what they were going to do, but eventually took about 6 months. They went from about 2067 in 1932 is 2067. It was that when they confiscated it in 1933, and by I think January of 34, they finally had pegged it at $35 an ounce. So they basically devalued the dollar by about 80%. And this is the closest analogy I think that we have to what's going on with the Putin gold peg, but it is in reverse. Okay, so it really should not come as a surprise to any of us if what is coming will make the Great Depression look like a Sunday school picnic, and it won't be like the Depression in the 1930s. It could be an inflationary depression, which is the worst kind. And it could be something so horrible that's going to be remembered far beyond the forgotten Korean War, Vietnam War, the Balkans, Somalia, not even 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, or this January 6th insurgency that the media has created. And perhaps, it could even, have a bigger impact on the psyche than the American Revolution and the Civil War. So here's an article that I wrote some time ago, last year, that gold is a viable Bitcoin competition, and that is the case. And I think Bitcoin is also a viable competition for the gold. So this is a healthy thing. As far as sound money goes, I think it's the best thing that's ever happened. I'd love to see the gold standard and Bitcoin compete with one another. Now here we're going to look at the Putin peg. The real test of the Putin peg will be the renewal of the peg. And again, it probably be renewed at 5,000 rubles per gram. And then we might get a test of it. We don't have to go down there and test it, but it wouldn't surprise me. I kind of lean that maybe they'll lower it a little bit, so they'll keep that arbitrage. Right now, you basically, with that peg, you can buy gold in Russia and get it at a substantial discount. And I know just yesterday the G7, now they're not going to accept Russian gold. Well, all you have to do is melt the gold down and you send it to China or send it somewhere else. That's no longer Russian gold. So I don't know how that they're just playing with words here. They don't. I mean, gold is sound money. It's not like Bitcoin because you still have to take it across those borders, but it is sound money. And so, anyway, this is a really good little chart, or it's an active way to monitor the Russian gold peg that somebody on TradingView came up with, and I really like that, so I have that link. Now, you might be saying, well, this can't happen. We're going to have inflation, okay, because we've inflated the dollar. Well, I think you're right. I think a lot of things will go up in price, but you got to also remember you can't eat dollars and you can't eat gold. So the rise in cost of living necessities really does not include gold. While gold is a store of value, it is also a luxury. Not everybody has gold. Most people don't. And it's beyond the reach of most people. And historically, it is currently overpriced compared with other things. And a lot of you are, I'm sure, familiar with the gold-silver ratio. You see this thing is a very wide ratio. It hasn't been this wide for a long time. It's on the high end of its range. And while many are familiar with the gold-silver ratio, which is historically high, few are familiar with the gold ratio compared with other commodities, which is also very high. And here's a link I had to this guy actually prices different things in gold, and he shows that the wheat price is it's a very, very low level compared to gold buys a lot of wheat, and so basically gold will be buying less wheat. So basically what my analysis is, you're going to see gold's going to perform very well, but it's not, you're not going to get wealthy owning gold. You're going to maintain what you have, and that's what we're going to see if we go into depression. If we go into where wealth is no longer being produced, the standard of living for everybody, it's just going to go down. It's not going to be the same world that we have today in another, next year or 2 or 3 years from now. But these gold ratios alone are not significant. There remains a moral aspect of money and value. And this is what I think the learning process is. This is what we're going to be learning, is the moral aspect of money and value. There are consequences when there is moral decay. Moral decay has nothing to do whether a nation is democratic or autocratic. Okay, if you're democratic and you're exporting, a bunch of crap and bad morality, which we do from the United States, that doesn't make it right. Democracy does not determine morals. Morals are a part. They can be followed by a benevolent dictator or by a informed public. The sanctions against Russia are backfiring, and they're backfiring on the West beyond popular comprehension. Guys, integrity is the foundation for faith, for full credit and confidence in a nation. And we've lost that. And you're going to see it, you're going to see it manifest itself in the years ahead. Now, it can be argued that integrity with non-inflationary purchasing media can be created representing new wealth in the marketplace with little underlying inventory of the standard adopted, whatever that standard is. Now, this was the 19th century innovation of self-liquidating commercial paper based on gold, and also known as the classical gold standard. With men of integrity, very small gold reserves were able to develop sound commercial banking so long as the weight and measure were maintained, and money creation and reduction were limited to the new wealth being offered into the marketplace. Now, today, Russia has sufficient gold reserves. That's not in question, but that's not all. While the poorest United States and NATO fight a proxy war with foreign lives, inflated foreign aid and false promises, Russia is protecting its borders in accord with its own version of the Monroe Doctrine and adopting austerity measures, giving confidence to the promise of gold redeemability via fiat. And the promise, the United States, we can't make this promise without sharply rising gold prices and further devaluing the dollar. While it remains to be seen if Russia can relearn the lost art of commercial banking, the cost of living will likely drop sharply, and the standard of living will rise in Russia compared to the West, and especially compared to the United States, and especially compared to Europe. This recovery will be a unique Russian recovery, measured apart from U.S. dollar measures and the microeconomics that we use, that all the economists and all the institutions use. IKEA, Starbucks, McDonald's will not be missed, but they'll be replaced with a uniquely Russian twist in Russia. And if they succeed, then those Russia may come up with the new McDonald's and be exporting their restaurants within the next generation. It will be an economic recovery the West will likely not see or understand any more than they can see or understand what is already happening. Or to quote Nikolai Patrushev, now he's the secretary of Russia's Security Council and a close ally to Putin. In fact, a lot of people think that a lot of people think Putin has cancer, and if he passes on, this guy will be the next leader in Russia, next president. So, but he says the most important condition for ensuring Russia's economic security is, why am I having problems with this? Okay. Is reliance on the country's internal potential. In other words, he sees the strength of his own nation, of his own resources, of his own people. And he was asked if these ideas contradicted with the economic theories. And these are the theories that are being put out by the West, by the United States, by the G7. And he said, no, they don't contradict the conclusions of economic science. They do contradict the conclusions of Western economic textbooks. Guys, they get it. I can't explain. They understand what's going on here, and they're making the right moves while we're making the wrong moves. The deliberate damage of the economy in the West that was done by elitists using COVID as a cover has consequences. And that can only be corrected over time. It will not be reversed, and it will not happen instantly. And the powers that be, they're blaming everyone, including Putin and Trump, and they continue down the ruinous path without changing anything. And the consequences, they were real in Russia, but they've only begun in the West. I think the consequences are the Russian people, okay, they get it. They've tightened their belts. They're not inflating their currency, quite the opposite. And here's some, I think, great links if you want to know more about what's the situation that's going on over there. And while we are mesmerized by the narrative, propaganda, and pornography of Hollywood, Russian culture through cinema is actually replacing preferences outside the West. I mean, the Goat Lady loves Russian movies. She was watching something, what is this? Because it was a Russian movie that's being translated into Spanish. And it was, a delight to watch compared to the trash that Hollywood's putting out. And, a lot of other cultures believe the same way. And Russia's winning not because it brings a better form of government, but it's winning because by default in the West, by its moral failure in democratic governing. All right, competing pegs are likely. Now, while Putin is universally condemned by the West, this is not so by other major nations like Mexico, India, China, or the Middle East. A major economic shift has occurred, but the United States is operating as though nothing has changed. Further, the Putin peg forces the United States to re-examine its place and stature in the world. Now, Putin pegged the gold 18% below the market. If the West pegs gold, they'll have to do it sharply higher if they ever want to recapture what they are rapidly losing. Now imagine Russia's position if the West is forced to peg gold at 3,000 or 6,000, or 12,000 or 18,000, or even $18,000. That'd be 10x. And that's what would probably happen. And what's going to happen then is people will bring their gold and they'll start accepting the dollar because they know it's pegged. And you don't need the gold anymore because you have a sound money. But imagine the inverse. Imagine if the United States is doing what Russia did and pegged gold at $1,600, which it is right here today, and likely will be continue after January 1st. Well, the bottom line is we can't do it. If the United States pegged the market below the market, everybody would be buying their gold and they could not meet the demand. This is the problem that we have. This is the inflation. This is the money supply that we have to distinguish. The sanctions of the West are likely to backfire far more than anyone has yet imagined. The freezing and seizure of Russian government and private assets began in February 2022, undermining the dollar confidence of all other nations. Now, Russia has threatened to retaliate, but they haven't done so. It's just kind of they're playing the chess game. Well, you guys are going to do this, we can do it too. But they haven't done it. Now, if they refuse to retaliate, I think Russia could establish itself as the peacemaker and the safe haven apart from U.S. hegemony. The West seems oblivious to its strategic economic mistakes and is focused on false and ad hominem attacks against a masterful international player who understands reality and is keeping peaceful options open while forcefully dealing with the powerful but discredited bully on the block whose best shots are noisy blanks. And this idea, well, we're not going to accept Russian gold, that's a noisy blank. I mean, that's the value of gold is not whose stamp is on it, but because it's gold. So that's why I think that they'll probably maintain that arbitrage of 17 or 18%, because Russia can afford to do it. It's not going to hurt them in the least, and it's going to really force the West's hand. Now, it should also be noted that neither George III, the tyrant George, who was a king during the Revolution, or the Bank of England sanctioned General George Washington during the Revolutionary War. His private funds were never blocked, and King George, if they had got a hold of Washington, he would have been hung. They would have hanged him. But they did not seize or block Washington's private property. Had Washington's assets been seized, the property of the loyalists would have also been undermined, endangering the loyalists and Canadian cause. The United States government today is far more tyrannical than King George and the Bank of England of yesteryear. There's also a saying attributed to Frederick Bastiat that when goods and services cannot move across borders, armies do. The West continues to compound its mistakes, undermining its own security and sharply increasing the likelihood the limited military operation will escalate into a major worldwide conflict. Now, while Russia from the outside appears weak, and that's also the narrative that the West is trying to present, it is internally strong. And while the United States and NATO are flexing their muscles and appearing strong and externally strong, they are internally weak. The United States had a lot to offer an anemic communist regime when Russia was under the old Soviet system. But it really has very little to offer the new Russia. And here's just one example of the imports and exports. The United States imports a lot more from Russia than Russia imports from the United States. So America should not grieve for being forced to sleep in the bed that they alone have made. Rather, hopefully, America will finally learn, to quote a popular philosopher who is incredibly renowned and revered by this generation, for this deeply profound observation, clean your room. And you know who I'm talking about, Jordan Peterson. Well, you know, this is something, again, it kind of shows the nonsense where we are today, how far we've gone in moral decay. And this is something that this generation apparently failed to learn and apparently was not taught to them 40 years ago. So we have no one but ourselves to blame. All right. This, of course, can all be quoted as long as you give me full credit. I also want to refer you to my new books that are available. I have this is we have what's called the Bitcoin Start Kit. If you want to support my work, this is a great way to do it. We have a special offer that's only available on the website where you can get both of my new books. You'll get audio versions of both of them. You'll get there'll be we're going to create a Telegram group, and you'll also get these items right here. This is the English edition. Two of these books are in Spanish, so we have a Spanish edition. But I will click this, and that is Bitcoin Starter Bag. Now it's $199.95, and if you order, you'll get, guys, you're going to get my first book, which I completed before the end of the year, and that's this right here, How to Put Yourself on the Gold Standard in One Easy Lesson. And you're going to get, we're actually issuing some bear coupons for our car wash, and so you'll get some samples of these. These actually represent this is one, what we call it a standard, which is 100 satoshis, or about 2 cents. This is 5 standards, or about 10 cents. And here's 10 standards, which is 20 cents, and they can be used for our car wash if you want to use it against the car wash or some snack or something like that. Now, you'll get this book signed by me. You can order these on Amazon, but I charge $129 for the book on Amazon, okay? And the same with this one. This is my other new book, Equity Trading. These are full color and illustrated. Great stuff. They'll be signed by me. This is a real NFT and a real collector's piece. It's hardbound and kind of like a Dr. Seuss book. So you'll get that. You're going to get some other things too. You're going to get, this is a comic book called Bitcoin Money. This also comes in Spanish, and Bitcoin Rabbi wrote this, and we're putting that in for the children. We've got, of course, Jimmy Song's classic, the Little Bitcoin book, that also comes in Spanish. We're also giving away with this package Saifedean's book, The Bitcoin Standard. Now, you may already have these, guys, and if you do, we're giving them away. Give them to a friend. Bitcoin is about educating others. So if you already have that, it's just another thing that we're adding value to our package, and we're also giving away Knut Svanholm's book, The Sovereignty Through Mathematics, and the new hard wallet, the Jade Wallet. So you'll be getting all of this. You'll be getting a Bitcoin bag. And you also get some other spiff items. We don't know what, maybe a shirt or a hat or whatever. But here we go. You're going to get all this with a bag. And anyway, it's $195. I think we charge for shipping. I think it's $10 if it's in the U.S., $10 or $15 for the U.S., and $35 for Europe, which I know it doesn't cover it in Europe, but that's what we're offering for. So anyway, you want to support what I'm doing, support my work, please purchase this package, and you'll be on our mailing list. We'll have a Telegram group, and we'll go from there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see what happens with this gold peg. They'll have probably announce it tomorrow or on the 30th, and we'll see if they continue it. I expect they will, and I think it'll at least be at the same price, and maybe a little bit lower, because they can afford to do that, and the United States can't. Nobody really understands why they're doing it or what it all means, and I think I'm closer to that than most people, because we've forgotten this. We forgot what a gold standard was. In fact, we never really remembered it very well. We knew that it worked, and then we quickly nationalized it. And so we don't want the great thing about Bitcoin is they can nationalize it all they want, but now we can keep the gold standard in these various jurisdictions honest. I think that's the real purpose and strength of Bitcoin. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.